You said something, interesting there about using the AI tool and our intern or genius in a box for supporting especially product discovery activities. And I'm wondering kind of what your take on the idea that the AI models are kind of trained to kind of come up with solutions that are down the middle.
Well, first, I will say they are not giving you things down the middle.
Okay.
Which is part of the whole reason I built BiasHawk. So, there are really good tools out there right now for when you're looking at LLMs and testing them for, say, demographic information in demographic groups. But what there isn't out there, what I discovered over the last couple of years, is there isn't anything out there that actually tests the fairness of the decision-making, the cognitive decision-making behind the scenes of the LLM. Not what it decided, but how it decided. How it made a decision.
You are one of the first people that we've had on this. Like, hey, you also have to be very aware of these bias, of the bias that exists within these systems. Give us like practical examples of like a bias that exists within these systems.
So you know how like when you ask Siri or Alexa for something, and sometimes that answer just feels a little off. Even if you're asking Claude or ChatGPT, anyway, that it gets stuck on an idea. And then tells you something confidently that turns out to be completely wrong. Now, I want you to imagine companies using the same kind of generative, non-deterministic AI to decide whether they approve your loan, how they are handling customer service complaints, or whether this is a good job applicant. Those systems have the same blind spots, the same bad habits that we as humans have, because it's built off of our content, what we've created. They can be stubborn. They can be swayed by the first thing they hear. They can double down on wrong answers. What I've been working on for the last 2.5 years is what I would call a quality inspector for those AI systems.
Right. We were on the test and model, and we find that maybe the bias is drifting outside of what we would consider acceptable. What do we do then?
So let's say you built your customer service chatbot on, I'm going to say OpenAI. We'll just use that as an example. So you built it. You're using ChatGPT, OpenAI's API, to make calls, and you see the responses. Well, you have a standard training model there, and how you do your prompt, what you've built up, and also the parameters and hyperparameters around which you are making those calls. You set this monitoring in place, you start seeing the drifting, you start seeing changes. That's when you can go back and make changes to your model, to your hyperparameters, to adjust how the model is called. That's where you may need to retrain the subset you have, or synthetic data. There's lots of ways to go about making those changes.
And I think that we were earlier talking about how, where does product become more valuable, right? We cannot pass off judgment to the AI. That is where human intrinsic value is going to be the most important moving forward, regardless of the role that you're in.
The why will always need to come from human.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be able to pull together everything that's being said, everything that's being not said, what's between the lines, what was done, how it was done, not just the factual side of it, but the emotional side of it too, what will resonate, and the storytelling around it. So that the decisions around why will need to come from a human. And at the end of it, that's what product is.
Sean, we just had a really awesome, thought-provoking conversation with John Haggerty. Love to hear what you got out of it.
There are a lot of podcasts about AI right now, but there's not a lot of podcasts that are talking about this topic at all. So John's been working on understanding the cognitive bias that exists within AI models today. He's got a product that he's working on to help surface them in a deterministic way. I think for this episode, you're going to need a couple of things. You're going to need a chair and a thesaurus, maybe a dictionary, right? And some patience. And maybe you're going to have to rewind a few times, because what we talk about is really unique. And I think this is going to be a great one for everybody.
Yeah, really love John's excitement and enthusiasm for really diving into a challenging area of AI. So let's do it.
Let's go.
All right. Joining us on the pod is John Haggerty. We're really excited to have you back. John is a product leader with 25 years of experience. He's been scaling digital products, companies such as Datasite, Prodege, Highway.AI. He runs PM Insider. He is an entrepreneur with a company that he has co-founded and is running called BiasHawk, which is a cognitive bias monitoring platform applying behavioral psychology frameworks to evaluate LLMs, which I'm really pumped to talk to you about today. He is also a trainer and teacher. He conducts MBA coursework at Case Western Reserve. I had the pleasure of sitting in a workshop with him a couple of years ago, which I think was the first time that anybody taught me about what prompting in AI was. So Josh, the real deal, super happy to have you back with us.
Thanks, Daniel. John, so glad to be here chatting with you guys again. This will be a fun conversation today.
I'm excited to hear about this tool you've built.
Well, where do we want to jump in?
Yeah, let's start with, everywhere we look, hey, new AI tool, AI is happening. Developers are going to write code, build entire features before you're done, thinking about what even a story could be. As product people, right, we're getting inundated from all directions. How do we, as product managers, kind of find that time that we need to just be able to think and evaluate and do good product work?
Oh, how do we find the time? We don't, for starters, because product is a 120-hour a week job. We don't get the time. What we do find is that AI is compressing that execution timing dramatically. And it's allowing us to automate some of the tasks that we are doing as product professionals, where we are operating like machines, and allowing us to automate and get into where we really need to be involved in cognitive thinking, in reasoning, in creative thoughts, adding context. All of those things come into play. It is also, that time period between idea to shipped. The expectation is we shrink that.
Mm-hmm.
Going from, used to be what, years to quarters to months. Now it's hours, if that. And so how do you actually take time to do the research, to do the deep thinking, to do the planning, to do the customer interactions, the market interactions, the market analysis, all those things that come into play? Well, that's where you can leverage AI to help you execute on that. I know I have a funny story about your guys' podcast, and I'm going to use it here as to highlight this. So about a year ago, I was driving home from work, and listened to your podcast in the car, and I had that moment where when I told the story to some of my buddies, it's like you're a musician, you're an artist, and your song comes on the radio. So you guys were talking with someone, and you quoted me in that episode, and when I talk about using AIs as your intern, and how you think about them as an intern. And so that's the same here with product managers. You have an intern. You have a really smart intern. The other analogy is the genius locked in a room with no windows. So you have a really genius intern that can do a lot of research, doesn't understand context, doesn't understand your business, doesn't always know what's honest, what's truthful, what's right, what's wrong, what you really need. Use it, but got to verify. You got to give it context. You got to give it understanding. Daniel, when we were in that workshop a couple of years ago, that was all about, well, how do you prompt? How do you build a prompt to do the work? We worked that workshop, delivered it last year, and it went from, prompt engineering 101 to now it's 200, and it's context engineering. And the night, after that, it's gonna be, well, how do you super meta prompt? And using AI, using LLMs versus each other, with each other and versus each other, to make sure that you're getting the factual information and the best information and the best results based off of what you need.
You said something, interesting there about using the AI tool and our intern or genius, in a box for supporting especially product discovery activities. And I'm wondering kind of what your take on the idea that the AI models are kind of trained to kind of come up with solutions that are down the middle, right? And then how, right, as product folks, then if we're using the tools, but they're providing kind of down the middle of the road solutions, do we kind of find the solutions that are more exceptional, right? That might have more traction, or the quote Nesreen Shangale, are going to be more delighting to users.
Well, first, I will say they are not giving you things down the middle,
Okay.
which is part of the whole reason I built BiasHawk. So, there are really good tools out there right now for when you're looking at LLMs and testing them for, say, demographic information in demographic groups. But what there isn't out there, what I discovered over the last couple of years, is there isn't anything out there that actually tests the fairness of the decision making, the cognitive decision making behind the scenes of the LLM, not what it decided, but how it decided, how it made a decision. So that doesn't, I would challenge that assumption. What the LLMs do, or what they are good at, is getting you beyond the blank page and using it for that, getting that first, the first few lines on the page to get you started, or giving you, like, one of the things I like doing is, hey, I need an idea for this. Give me 5. Spits out 5, and then I can take that and run with it. Okay, what if I do this? Combine them, put things together, and go on. The other side of it, one thing that's really is awesome is just meta prompting. I go into Claude and I'm like, hey Claude, I'm working on this. How would I go about prompting for this idea? And it gives me an idea of how to prompt for it. Then I go over to ChatGPT or Perplexity, or or if I've got Llama running somewhere, or Gemini, and like, okay, here's what I need using what Claude gave me. Like in the people that take my course now, they get access to my Perplexity project that I built, which is a product manager focused prompt library. You put in there what you want, and it spits out a markdown file, usually somewhere between 90 to 115 rows, or 15 lines of a prompt, really detailed process, organization, structured from a product manager, with product management in mind, and building up what you want. But you just tell it what you want to do, and it will return to you, hey, here's a prompt you can use within any LLM to get that as a markdown file. So those are like, when you think about how we go about doing our work, it's finding the areas where you can get that leg up from automating part of it.
Yeah.
And then is it getting beyond that blank page? Is it the review and analysis? Is it the digestion of information? Is it the repetitive tasks, like going about and one of the things I think about is how we do market analysis or competitive research. Just the scraping of that information, pulling it together, doing that first high level digest of what that information looks like. It's a great way to set up an agentic tool to go do that for you, especially if it's going to scrape the alt text, because then you get behind the scenes of what the competitor is actually thinking versus what you think they're thinking. Just, great little things like that you can find out. You use it going agentic versus doing it manually. There's a lot of other ways that you can leg up, but when you get behind the blank page, when you get beyond that blank page, using a tool, an LLM, whatever your go-to is, you are going to then need to add context. You're going to need to add understanding. You're going to need to add scope to it, and you're going to need to verify it. So it's the starter or the aggregator, or one of the other ways I like to use it is the mirror. hey, here's what I've created. Here's what I'm thinking. This is where I'm at. Where am I wrong? What are the questions I'm going to get from engineering, from customer service, from QA, from legal and compliance, from finance? Ask me those questions. Create the FAQ for me from this so I have it. Those are great ways to put, to use it as as that mirror to look back at you. Okay, this is what I put together for my PRD. Why am I wrong? Where are my gaps? Point out to me my inconsistent thinking. So when you're able to bring it back and to check yourself with it, it's great ways like that. Problem is there's, sunk cost fallacy and other biases that exist within these LLMs that they want. Like ChatGPT, really good cheerleader of all your ideas. For it to tell you it's a bad idea, that's a real struggle. But there are ways to go about it with how you prompt and what you put in, how you ask it to review.
You said something earlier about compressing tasks, which I agree at a high level. That is happening currently, and will be an expected norm in the future, right? I think for product people, what it means for us is that we have to identify what becomes more valuable, right? I think the people that are making, when we see like C-suite executives making poor decisions today about their workforce, right? Like, hey, we're supposed to be 20% more efficient, so we need 20% less people, right? Do you need 20% less people, or do you need that 20% of their time back to help reinvest into the business, right? Because I feel like the companies that are not making these drastic labor changes are actually going to position themselves better in market because they're actually going to have the resources available to come up with the future of that business, right? And to help push that business forward.
Yep, right. Great. You've improved productivity by 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What happens when that breaks? What happens when it's wrong? What happens when that underlying concept of what you are doing goes off the rails? What if there is, we already know that there's bias and heuristics that exist in these large language models. If that's being built in to all the decisions, all the process that's being made, who's catching it? Who's there to look for it? Who's there to monitor it? Yeah, we do all the when we put these systems in place, we do the testing, we do the vetting, we do all the checks that go into place. But if we're using non-deterministic evolutionary systems, who's monitoring it?
Yeah.
These systems are designed to evolve. They're designed to change. They're designed to drift. Who's monitoring that to making sure that the decision quality stays where it's supposed to be?
So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because this is where I want this. This is where I really wanted our conversation to go, right? Because we've heard so much about how it's easier to create now more than ever. But I think also because of the new speed of business, it's never been more expensive to get something wrong, right? Because while you are fixing your mistake, the rest of the market is going to continue moving forward in front of you, right? So I guess let's go down and learn more about, you are one of the first people that we've had on this, like, hey, you also have to be very aware of these bias of the bias that exists within these systems. So can you give us like an example, or give us 5 examples. Use models before. Give us like practical examples of like a bias that exists within these systems.
So you know how like when you ask Siri or Alexa for something, and sometimes that answer just feels a little off. Even if you're asking Claude or ChatGPT, anyway, that it gets stuck on an idea and then tells you something confidently that turns out to be completely wrong. Now, I want you to imagine companies using the same kind of generative non-deterministic AI to decide whether they approve your loan, how they are handling customer service complaints, or whether this is a good job applicant. Those systems have the same blind spots, the same bad habits that we as humans have, because it's built off of our content, what we've created. They can be stubborn. They can be swayed by the first thing they hear. They can double down on wrong answers. What I've been working on for the last 2.5 years is what I would call a quality inspector for those AI systems. Before a company turns on their AI loose on real customers, we've created a tool that actually runs through a series of tests to see if it's reasoning well. If it, what are those bad habits that are baked in? Where do they fall? How prevalent are they? How often do they come up? And then provide options for how to fix it. So, like there's lots of different cases, lots of different options I could go into, but like, that's in a nutshell what you're seeing. It's what exists today. I ask the two of you a simple question. Would you rather have, this is the level of like questions like I'm talking to these about with these systems when I talk about heuristics and biases. Would you rather have a surgery that has a 95% survival rate or a 5% fatality rate?
I don't have a good answer.
The math is the same, right?
Yeah.
But which one would you rather have the doctor tell you? It's a 95% survival rate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just loss aversion. That's all that is. In our minds, it's how things are. So these systems have those same type of things built into them.
Mm.
Do we chase our losses with sunk cost fallacy? And how do we go about that? Anchoring bias. We always hear the first person that says a number loses the negotiation. Well, these systems, when you put a number in there, it's going to latch onto that. That's going to become its anchor for how everything else is built around that. Same thing comes in with that first piece of information, that first idea, the first thing that comes in, it's going to glom onto that. It's not what the decision is or what that output is, it's how it got to it.
You mentioned you gave us a case earlier when we were talking about just trying to have one of these models agree that, or like tell you that your idea is bad.
Yep.
Right. I had never thought of it that way before, but I don't know if one has ever told me that my idea was bad. It's given me direction on how to change, but it's never said this was the wrong place to start.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the halo effect. It always thinks it's a good idea. I think someone once called ChatGPT like your overbearing aunt that just loves everything you do. Like that's the way it comes across.
So, John, in an intro, we mentioned that you are co-founder CEO of BiasHawk, and we've been discussing how the biases are being, they get built in LLMs because LLMs are built by humans and we're highly fallible. Really would love to hear kind of what you're doing with BiasHawk and how you are, kind of building out some of those tests to see how models are evolving over time.
Yeah. So, I guess I'll give the Genesis story first before we go anywhere. So about 2.5 years ago, late autumn of 2023, I was sitting in my doctor's office and I was filling out my semi-annual depression assessment. One of those, required, like, I think it's like 8 or 10 question, how you rate between 0 to 5, where you fall in these, and filling out. And I just had this like spark of inspiration. I was like, I don't think a LLM could ever get depressed. But we have a lot of other standard behavioral assessments that we could administer to an LLM, find out where it falls with these biases, with these heuristics, with the decision-making process it's using, and then track that longitudinally. These are non-deterministic evolutionary systems. You can't do deterministic output-based testing. You can't give it a standard set of data and then expect a standardized result out of it. That's not how non-deterministic systems work. But you can test versus the process in which how it makes a decision. So what we focused on is creating a platform that monitors these LLM powered platforms. It runs continuous automated testing right now against 5 core cognitive biases. I use Daniel Kahneman's research in behavioral economics as the baseline for what we built out initially. So we're looking at anchoring, loss aversion, confirmation bias, sunk costs, fallacy, and the availability heuristics. Um, right now, integrate it with 7 major LLM providers, but we have the option to integrate with kind of an open API call with any others. We built 60 bias test cases that are purpose built for this. And then our testing accounts for the non-deterministic nature of those LLMs and does a deterministic analysis of their responses, so we can get statistically defensible results.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is we it's a standard questionnaire. It does have some variability in how it asks the question and which questions it asks, sends that over to the LLM. The LLM will generate its non-deterministic response. That comes back and we use deterministic AI. So yes, it is AI on the end, but it is deterministic. So it is a decision forest that uses sentiment analysis and other machine learning text analysis to look at that response, looking for key themes, keywords, phrasing, all those kind of things to determine whether or not that bias is present and at what level, and then scores that and then tracks that score longitudinally over time to look for shifts in it.
What are some of the things that have stood out to you immediately, either that maybe confirmed some of the bias against the LLMs that you already had, or some things that were just new that you didn't expect from the results you got?
Nothing I didn't expect, because it was about 2+ years of research before we even started writing code on it. And I was doing manual testing before that of the systems myself. What I can say is, yes, it's app there. All of these exist at different levels, and different models have different prevalence of them. So there's a different blend between the models.
Okay. What are some
So
of
I guess,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
yeah, so right, we were on the test and model, and we find that maybe the bias is drifting outside of what we would consider acceptable. What do we do then? Is that a choice where, like, use another guy as a prop person, do I use another model? Or if it's an internal tool, am I changing, like,
So let's say you've built your customer service. It's a prime example. You built your customer service chatbot on, I'm going to say OpenAI. We'll just use that as an example. So you built it. You're using ChatGPT, OpenAI's API, to make calls, and you see the responses. Well, you have a standard training model there, and how you do your prompt, what you've built up, and also the parameters and hyperparameters around which you are making those calls. You set this monitoring in place. You start seeing the drifting. You start seeing changes. That's when you can go back and make changes to your model, or to your hyperparameters to adjust how the model is called. You may also be seeing too many and over dependent on certain problems. So you get that availability bias that comes into play based off the questions and what's happening. That's where you may need to retrain the subset you have, or add synthetic data. There's lots of ways to go about making those changes. And within our product, we actually create a list of, hey, here's some things you could do to help solve for if you're starting to see major drift, or if it's outside, if it is extremely prevalent.
This concept, this idea, I think this idea, as I've tried to expose myself to more models and more use cases, right? So I'm trying to actually build some of my own applications, right? I couldn't spell Ubuntu 2 months ago, and now I've got an instance running an app that I'm hoping to use with friends, in the upcoming couple of seasons, just to get people using something and testing something that I've built. This is like a concept that I think is super unique, because it's beyond just like, here, go and use this thing and trust it. right? And I think that right now, especially with like the direction that we're getting from the executive suite, right, which is do AI, right? You said something in our initial call about this episode where you said that you keep hearing this phrase, well, ethics aside, right?
Yes.
Why do you keep hearing that phrase?
That's a really good question. Because, they're like, so as we talked about, I keep hearing different podcasts, different, keynotes, TEDx or, TEDx, whatever it is, the different speakers say, and they'll talk about AI and they'll talk about the work and they're talking about, and then the phrase always comes up. Now, ethics aside, this is what it's doing. This is why we're doing it. This is how it works, blah, 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 blah. And, uh, to the point, my co-founder and I are looking at starting our own podcast, literally called AI Ethics Aside. AI Aside, two words. And to talk about this topic. I think it is because it becomes a very difficult conversation, and difficult things we have avoidance tendency, so we'll avoid it. You do have the demographic bias, the fairness side of AI, how it treats things. We talked, I talked about that when I was at your conference, you had almost 2 years ago now. We did a fireside chat on this. How is it making these decisions? You can talk, Apple, and their credit card, and the fairness around, gender fairness within it. There was the recidivism tool that was built. There was a healthcare system or a health cost or health analysis system that used uh, data around healthcare spend as a proxy for healthcare need. And then the need for people of color, especially the Black and Brown community, were lower because of, not because of need, but because of socioeconomic reasons and availability of healthcare. So the fairness side of it. Additionally, and what I'm bringing up and why BiasHawk was formed, it goes beyond just the fairness analysis into quality of the decision that's making.
Mm-hmm.
How are we making? We taught you, Sean, you said earlier, we're humans, we're fallible, we make mistakes. AIs are built upon what we know and what we've created and what we've done. Those same mistakes are being repeated. And because now AI is learning from AI, they're being amplified.
Yeah.
So how do we monitor and watch for that in these systems? It is extremely difficult. It is extremely hard. And some of it, it's hard to wrap your head around it. This is super meta. I'm literally talking about an AI system that serves as a behavioral clinical psychologist to diagnose the bias and heuristics in other AIs.
Yeah.
Super meta.
You mentioned when you talked about at the conference, one of the things you talked about originally was just judgment in general. And I think that we were earlier talking about how, where does product become more valuable, right? We cannot pass off judgment to the AI. That is where like human intrinsic value is going to be the most important moving forward, regardless of the role that you're in, right? Because you are going to have to determine how far you trust these systems and where you are willing to put your name on something that was created with the use of them.
The why will always need to come from a human.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be able to pull together everything that's being said, everything that's being not said, what's between the lines, what was done, how it was done, not just the factual side of it, but the emotional side of it too, what will resonate. and the storytelling around it. So that the decisions around why will need to come from a human. And at the end of it, that's what product is. Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really
Why
feels
does it
like it comes
matter?
full circle, right? Like this is why we need to have that time to think, right? And now we need right now as product people, where we need to know how bias is impacting ourselves, and also be aware of how it is embedded in the tools that we're using. So yeah, these are interesting times for us product people, aren't they?
It's they're always interesting times. There's always something.
When should we start looking out for the first signs of BiasHawk in the wild?
Oh, if you're interested, check out our website. Drop me a note on the website or find me on LinkedIn. I'm literally like, tell you guys before we start recording, I literally filed the incorporation paperwork today. Over the like the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing public announcements about it and things like that. So we're just getting it started. We're looking for those first, we're pre-revenue right now. So we're looking for those first design partners to come on board with us, who want to test this out, who want to try it, who want to give it give it a go and see where their systems are at. So yeah, those things they're coming. It's coming.
That's awesome. Congratulations on your new venture. John, this was awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. Normally I go through takeaways, but I think the biggest takeaway for me was just how much I just didn't know about this topic, and but at the same time, equally like how important the topic is, right? As somebody that teaches his own workshops on AI now and promotes some of the work that I'm doing with AI, it's just really important for us to understand the judgment that we need to execute when using these new systems, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love, John, that you're kind of facing some of these big challenges head on. Like, it's really cool.
It's it is crazy. And like we didn't even get discussion of how I built this, which is its own story.
The next one for your
Next
third
one.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
we get you on for the
Third
third
time's a
time.
charm.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, John, thank you again so much for being with us today.
Always, gents. Always a pleasure hanging out with you too.
Thanks for coming.